Robbie, welcome.
Hey, glad to be here. Good to see you, Waj.
All right. It's 2026. We have masked armed ICE agents killing unarmed white women. We have MAGA saying that how dare you protest in a church, but you can go ahead and kill a white woman. You can use a 5-year-old child as bait. You can terrorize a city. And you have a lot of Christians more upset about Don Lemon following a bunch of peaceful protesters in a church because the pastor, folks, is a ICE agent, but they're not really upset about a white woman who's shot and killed. But they're very Christian. Robbie, how do you explain
Mhm.
this?
Well, I tell you, so I'm from, as you said, I'm from Mississippi. I grew up Southern Baptist. I have a degree from a Southern Baptist seminary. So that church was a Southern Baptist church that we're talking about, where the protest took place. And the first bells that went off in my head actually were, you mentioned we're in 2026, but the first bells that went off in my head was actually from 1963. Because there was another set of church protests that happened in 1963 in my hometown of Jackson, Mississippi. They were led by Medgar Evers. And what happened in June of 1963, in fact, this was the last campaign that Medgar Evers was involved with before he was murdered in cold blood in his own driveway. Was he was trying to integrate the white Southern Baptist and United Methodist churches in downtown Jackson, Mississippi, because they were the home churches of Ross Barnett, our blatantly segregationist and racist governor, and Mayor Alan Thompson, who was the segregationist mayor. Who are holding on to this segregationist white supremacist state in Mississippi, and Evers basically said, like, look, um, we can't let the churches, pretend that they have nothing to do with this when they are like holding up and legitimizing, given moral cover for this state, and in fact, inside of them have these agents of the state. So I think there were a lot of parallels for me that went on, and I should just kind of connect the dots for folks. I mean, people um, probably know Medgar Evers' name, but they probably don't know that the last thing he did was try to integrate churches and to try to try to expose the fact that these churches were giving moral cover for political leaders inside their churches, and to try to expose that for the lie that it was, and that 2 days later he was gunned down in his driveway. Wait for it, by an Episcopalian white Christian. That's who pulled the trigger. Byron De La Beckwith was an Episcopalian white Christian from the Delta, who, by the way, had stood on the weeks before had stood on his own church steps up in the Delta, saying, "If any black people try to enter my church, I'm going to stand on the steps with a pistol and just leave it to me. I'll handle it." So he had already been on record, sort of defending this space. So, like, that for me was kind of what the kind of historical parallels that really rang out from this past week.
And I mean, speaking about the parallels, I have a bunch of conversations this week with historians. We're talking about the parallels of, we don't even need to call ICE Gestapo. We could just call them Southern law enforcement. We could just call them the slave patrol. We could just call them what black people have experienced in the Jim Crow South, right? White men with badges with a completely corrupt system where the judiciary, law enforcement, elected officials were all in bed with the same white supremacist agenda. And speaking about that same year of 1963, you had MLK being arrested, and he's in jail in the Birmingham jail, and he writes about the white
Yeah,
moderates and the great lament of the white moderates who sit there and are perfectly fine with this. And he said are a greater stumbling block to justice than the white citizens counselor and the Ku Klux Klaner. And don't you
yeah,
see parallels to that,
yeah.
especially with Democrats who voted for the ICE funding yesterday?
My favorite line, that I think is just such a searing, it's hard to say my favorite line, I guess, but the one that is just like is seared in my memory from Letter from Birmingham Jail about white churches that, again, I think are really relevant, because what did the pastor and the Baptist Association of Minnesota say after the church protest when they put out a statement complaining? They said, "Oh, these churches are supposed to be sanctuaries where white people can come and not have to be worried about the things that are going on outside in the world.
Didn't they just say that 2 days ago or 3 days
Yeah,
ago?
yeah, yeah. That's what they
Yeah.
said. We're here to worship Jesus. That's what we're doing inside these churches. And that has nothing to do with what's happening outside. And that was exactly the attitude of the white supremacists and the Southern Baptists. And I should say that, again, to kind of make the trajectory here clear, the Southern Baptist Convention, again, this is the denomination I grew up in, was founded in 1845. And they were founded that year because they decided that they could no longer be in fellowship with their northern brethren, because the northern brethren were saying to them, it's inconsistent to call yourself Christian and enslave others based on the color of their skin. They were like, no, no, no. We think this is perfectly consistent with the gospel and the Jesus that we worship. They founded an entire denomination on that, and that denomination has become the largest Protestant expression of Christianity in the country today. So if we're kind
Wow.
of confused about, like, why is this so easily acceptable? I mean, part of it is that because inside of white Christianity, the largest Protestant expression of Christianity stems directly from this move to say that, oh no, actually enslaving others is completely compatible with the gospel and the worship of Jesus and the worship of white Jesus, I should say, as we see it.
And I think this is important, right? Because everyone thinks this is something new. And
Yeah,
people of color, especially Black people, Native Americans, Muslims, especially after the war on terror, we're saying, no, no, this is
yeah.
America. I can't stand it when Joe Biden said this, and you heard Governor Wall say this also last week, which I thought was very milk toast. Was this is not who we are, and the rest of us are saying this is
Mhm.
exactly who we are. This is us. This is how it's been. Like this is who we have been. We've just chosen to ignore it. And the Gestapo is a very good example and analogy that I've used also. But we don't even have to go across to Europe. We could
Yeah.
just take the DeLorean to the south.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing a lot from even from kind of more progressive kind of white Christian groups is the question that kind of been going through across my social media feeds has been, are we in a Bonhoeffer moment? Right.
Mm,
So Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right, was the German priest who a pastor who did stand up against the Nazis early on, one of the very few. And so he is an admirable figure. But here's the thing: if you really understand that history, one of the places where he got his spine stiffened is that he actually was at Union Theological Seminary in New York and
wow.
was going to church in Harlem. He was attending black churches in Harlem where he was hearing this Christian message of civil rights and social justice. And that actually was part of what he took back to Germany with him. So even in that, we've got kind of this seed planted from the African American Christian tradition of standing up against injustice here. But I think you're right. The other thing to say is that, oh no, actually, we don't have to look that far to see both the negative examples, but we also don't have to look that far to see the positive examples of people standing up, right? Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, right? We have Christian examples on this side of the pond. And my good friend Jamar Tisby has been like standing on his soapbox saying, yeah, 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 of course we could go to Germany and we can look at the kind of minority of people that resisted the Nazis. Most white Christians went along with it. But we
That's
can
right.
look at that, right? We can totally look at that. But why not look right here at home at the black Christians that stood up and said enough, right, to their fellow white Christians and to what this white supremacist thing that was parading around as if it was democracy, but it wasn't. What I've said, and the last point here is that I'll make, but right on this, we've always had in this country two competing visions of the country. One of them has been this idea of us as a pluralistic democracy that has been there. But the thing that everybody, I think, doesn't quite get is that before the founding of the republic, there was this settler colonial effort, right? That's what the country was birthed out of. And all of these images of Columbus and treatment of indigenous people, enslavement and the transatlantic slave trade, that's all of a piece. And so we have this kind of one vision of democracy, pluralism, but we have this other competing tradition that has always been there. We've never exorcised it from the American psyche. And that is this idea of America as a promised land for European Christians.
Yep.
And that vision is back in spades, right? It's never gone away. We've never fully exercised it. But I think that is the thing that we are seeing now right out in the open. And again, it's because it's been waiting in the wings. It's been covered up a little bit. We did have dog whistles. Now we're just right out back to this is the program. right? We
Yeah.
are trying to reassert this idea. Yes, manifest destiny. That was kind of a polite way of talking about it, but overtly, it really is. No, no, no. This land has been designated by God for one subgroup of people who are white and of European descent and Christian.
And yeah, we'll talk about the doctrine of discovery in a second. We'll take the DeLorean all the way back, but I just want to make a point because anyone who's watched The Left Hook or been reading me for a long time, I've been saying it. Don't listen to me. Listen to Robbie. He's actually the historian. Is that there's like two visions of America, right? There's the Statue of Liberty who welcomes everyone, and then there's Donald Trump trying to grab her by the pee. There is Bonhoeffer who got inspired by the resistance to slavery from black churches, and then there is literally Nazi Germany that took lessons from Jim Crow South and said,
Yeah,
my God,
that's right.
these people have perfected segregation and racism. Nazis took lessons from American racism, folks. I'm not making that up. And they're like, we could probably refine this, but my God, this is such an efficient machine. We're so inspired by these white supremacists, right? You've seen Donald Trump, who I say is American as apple pie and slavery, and then you see Frederick Douglass. And I think the problem with Robbie is that what America has always done is they say, we are like Harriet Tubman and Statue of Liberty and George Washington
Mm.
and Abraham Lincoln. Let's not talk about Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis, but let's just make monuments after them. Let's not talk about racism. Let's get to reconciliation. And we always want to get to reconciliation without truth. And without
Mm.
confronting and acknowledging the truth, you get a Donald Trump. And I feel like Democrats also, the centrists, the Vichy Democrats, I call them, same thing. Don't talk about the woke. Don't talk about BLM. Don't talk about abolish ICE. Let's just move on, move on. Post-racial society, we'll brush it on the rug, inshallah, inshallah, and everything will be fine. And it won't be fine. And now it's coming to a
Yeah.
head where literally MAGA is promoting Nazi slogans. I'm not saying this, folks, Nazi slogans. One of one of ours, all of yours. One of ours, all of
Yeah.
yours. That is a Nazi slogan that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, she stood behind a lectern that had that slogan. And we've said this before on the show, but for those who don't know, that was literally a Nazi slogan used to justify the slaughter of all Czech men in a village after an SS officer was killed. So they said, oh, you killed an SS officer? One of ours, all of yours? That's what she stood behind after they murdered a white woman. I want to
Yeah.
actually, before we talk about the doctrine of discovery, I think this is important for white folks and those who are privileged and the privileged people of color who think that their Tesla and their Rose and their tax cuts will protect them. Let's just stick in the 60s for a second, because I think the parallels are fascinating. Around the time of 63 and 64, these black activists realized no one cares about black bodies, black skulls being crushed, but they might care about white folks if white
Mm.
folks were with us. And can you tell us how the white Southerners saw and treated the white folks who were allies with black folks?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to this, make it really concrete. Let's go back to these two churches I was talking about that Medgar Evers was trying to integrate, right, and trying to kind of out them morally, right. That you couldn't be, that you couldn't just quietly call yourself Christian and be for this segregationist apartheid state. So what happened in the Methodist Church when they did go in? They were first of all, there was a group of black and white worshipers that went into the church, were forcibly removed from the church, and the pastor of the church there actually he resigned and was exiled from. Now the church kept its segregationist policy and kicked out the pastor. Right, so that was happened all over the place. There's some really great scholarship on this that by and large, what happened is that when white people stood up, they were exiled. They were they were ridiculed. They were death threats. They were in many cases forced to leave the community or the state. I mean, so that's what we're going to see, and I think that's where we're at. Honestly, is that we're going to have to see. And I've seen some comments going by here. It's like, oh, don't lump us all together. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, I consider myself Christian. That's an important part of my own identity. But here's the thing. The only way that we don't get lumped in with them is if we stand up and say no. Right? That's the way we don't get lumped in with them. And the only way we get a Christianity that's not completely associated with the Nazis and the segregationists and the racists is if we bring a different kind of Christianity into the world, right? But that's going to be, I think we're very used to, I think people who look like me, particularly white straight men, are used to being, a pretty comfortable thing to kind of own this identity. And I think it's really going to take people putting their bodies on the line and saying no. Actually, it's going to finally be Christians like to talk about kind of costly discipleship and being kind of having courage, but that's about to become very, very real under this Trump administration.
And it's happening right now in Minnesota at 2 p.m. The mass walkout, and hundreds of churches and faith leaders, not just churches, but also synagogues and mosques are joining in this movement, as you've seen. And also in some other places, you saw churches give refuge to immigrants and join. So we're seeing, and I've always said this, folks, you need to publicly hear and see from faith leaders, especially white Christians. You need like a public face. You need a reclaiming of Christianity, of religion, of religious values, of religious language, because you and I know this, Robbie, and this is much to the chagrin of many progressives and liberals. They say religion's stupid. You guys are idiots. Stop believing in God. I said, yes, yeah, it's fine. I've heard it all. You might be done with religion, but sadly, for better and for worse, religion is not done with America and American politics. And if you simply dismiss all religion, religious people, then you're dismissing a huge chunk of America that is motivated by God and religion, which now, unfortunately, because we have ceded the ground, it has been taken over by MAGA. Am I wrong with this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can look at some numbers here. So, what's gotten a lot of press, rightly, is the shifts in the religious landscape in the U.S. You and I have talked about this a lot. But and so the headlines have been, oh man, it's now 27% of the public that claims no religious affiliation whatsoever, and that's claimed headlines because it's never been that high in America. This 27%. But if you kind of flip that on its head, it means that it's still about 3/4 of the country that claims some religious affiliation of some kind. Now, it's becoming much more diverse. It's not just white Christians. In fact, white Christians today only make up 41% of the country. All right. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing this, what I've kind of only half jokingly called, like, the great white Christian freakout moment that we're seeing in the country, is because white Christians are no longer an unquestioned majority in the country. And that's new, actually. That's only been true for the last 20, 25 years. So there's this demographic shift that's going on in the country. But it does mean that there still is 3/4 of the country that considers faith of some kind, whether it's Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, Sikh, whatever. That's an integral part of their lives. And I think for religious people, and this is like kind of where I'm at, and kind of what the new book Backslide is really partly about, is saying, look, every generation has a choice about what the faith they've inherited is going to be.
Mm.
Right? We all receive it. And if you grew up in a religious community, there are things that you receive you can't do anything about, right? It came from the previous generation, their interpretation of what the faith means, and what the religion means. You receive it, but every generation has a moral responsibility to say, okay, now I've received this. What if this is right? What if this is screwed up? And what of this do I want to pass on to my children? And what of this can I bring forward to make the country better? Or, what of this can I use as power to leverage my place over others? I mean, those are two paths you could take with a religious tradition. It has a kind of moral power to it, and I'm sort of advocating for folks like, look, particularly people who look like me, this is the time where we're really going to have to pick up the mantle and say, if we don't want Christianity to be associated with ICE, if we don't want Christianity to be associated with Trump, if we don't want Christianity to be associated with the Nazis and the racists, we're going to have to build and put out there a different version of Christianity that people can, in fact, see, one that's compatible with democracy, one that celebrates pluralism, and one that is willing to put itself on the line, right, to help bring those things into reality.
And, on the flip side of it, explain to us what we're dealing with the white Christian nationalist
Yeah.
subsect of MAGA, which is not even a subsect. I think it's clear that it's, not all MAGAs are the same. But what I always try to say is, look, you got the Stephen Millers who are straight up white nationalists. You have the oligarchy with Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, right? At the end of the day, they want power, white power, and money. But also now you're seeing Peter Thiel, to our point, realizing how powerful religion is, and he's now couching his techno-fascist utopia in religious language,
Yeah.
right, folks? Remember that a couple of months ago when he did the Antichrist Commonwealth Club lectures? It was to merge religion with techno-fascism and try to win over these white Christian nationalists. And then you have Russell Vought, who's the co-author of Project 2025, who's an avowed white Christian nationalist. So they've all merged together. The end game is white
Mhm.
power and control, but without white Christian nationalism, they can't do it. That's a huge chunk of this. So as we're trying to reclaim our faith for justice and for decency, they're going full steam ahead with the cross for white Christian nationalism. For those who don't know, what exactly is white Christian nationalism and what's their end game?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll give you a couple of definitions. One, I think if you wanted just a clear conceptual definition, it's back to this phrase that I said before. One that's really grounded in history is this: it is the belief that God has designated these lands in the United States of America to be of, by, and for white Christians. Right? It's a promised land. For European Christians, like that's the vision, and so what that means is that it's a very hierarchical worldview, and it means that if you are not white and you are not Christian, this land is not for you, and you can maybe live here under sufferance, right, in some second class way, but it is never going to be your land, right? That's the vision. When we measure this, so we've been able to measure this. A lot of really solid political science and sociology research. We've done at PRRI as well. We measure by asking questions like, "Do you agree or disagree that U.S. law should be based on the Bible? Do you agree or disagree that the U.S. should declare itself a Christian nation? That Christians should hold dominion over all other people in the land, over U.S. institutions?" When we ask those questions and we kind of put them all together in a composite scale, what we find is that there's about 3 in 10 Americans. So it's a minority, but 3 in 10 Americans who we classify as either Christian nationalism adherents or sympathizers, right? These are people who pretty much believe that worldview. The adherents agree to every question we ask them on that. Sympathizers lean that direction, just not as strongly. But it does mean that I think that there's sort of bad news and good news here. The good news is that by a margin of 2 to 1, people who reject that worldview outnumber them, right? So there actually are more of us who want to live in a pluralistic country than there are those who want this to be a white Christian country. How the problem is that they have taken over white evangelical Christianity, and they have taken over the Republican Party. And
There you
so
go.
they have kind of magnified. So even though it's only 3 in 10 Americans, it is 2/3 of white evangelicals
There
who
you go.
believe this view. It is 54% of Republicans. So it's a majority of Republicans and a super majority of white evangelicals that are like all in. They're not. It's not a dog whistle or anything. It just is. Yeah, we're going to straightforwardly say this is our view of who the country is of, by, and for, and that's really what we're fighting. And because the MAGA movement has taken over, it is the core beliefs really of the MAGA
Yep.
movement that we're seeing operating, and they've just kind of taken over through the apparatus of government, and then you compound that with gerrymandering, the kind of weird distorting effects of the electoral college in presidential campaigns, and it does mean that a 30% group that's very, very dedicated and very active in politics can actually take over the levers of one political party, and then through that take over the levers of the government. And that's the regime we're living in.
And I think people need to realize that. That's why, when we always talk about white Christian nationalism, people are like, what are you talking about? Nah, just call it Christian nationalism. No, I deliberately say white Christian nationalism because it's white supremacy mixed in with religion. And now, either through sincerity or just political cynicism, we've seen MAGA now embrace it. Charlie Kirk, Turning Points USA, Christian. He openly said, yeah, I don't believe in the separation of church and state. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, right? They're openly saying this stuff now, right? This is a
Yeah.
country for white Christian Americans only. Nick Fuentes says this, America First. It's part and parcel of the America First movement, right? And then there's an aspect of this that people don't know where now they're openly, proudly saying this. Can you talk to us about the Seven Mountains theology, about how they will implement or take over power very deliberately by using these different levers of, because people don't know about this.
Yeah.
And they're openly telling people now.
Yeah, well, it's at the heart of that question that we asked to identify Christian nationalists is where it says that Christians should exercise dominion over other people in the country and other institutions. The Seven Mountains Mandate is basically a way of politicizing that theology and making it very explicit that what you're looking at, the Seven Mountains, are things like government, education, churches, culture. These are the mountains that Christians are to take over. So it really is a blueprint for social and political domination of non-Christian people in the country.
Yeah, and so for those who don't know, seven mountains, like Robbie said, is like these different sectors of society. Think about it, like finance, culture,
Yep.
education, government. And what they're saying is we just capture it. So we'll go and we'll infiltrate with our numbers and our money, and we'll capture each of these levers, right? Each of these mountains. And once we have these seven mountains and we've taken over culture and politics and government and education, and I don't have the seven mountains in front of me, but I think we got five of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Then with our strong but robust minority, we run the tables. And we're not
Yeah.
interested in democracy. We're not interested in a representative government. We're not interested in the 19th Amendment. Now they're openly saying it. They're openly saying it. 19th Amendment? Now we don't want it. That's Christ Church, the Church of Christ, excuse me, that Pete Hegseth belongs to. Can you tell people about our Secretary of War's church and their views? Because I think
Yeah.
they haven't hidden it.
Right. So, well, I live here in DC, and so that there's this newish church that's been established right downtown. It's a church that Pete Hegseth goes to, and it is a church right out of this explicitly Christian nationalist mentality. And I should say this too: it is connected to Doug Wilson, who is also connected to the church where the ICE officer is a lay pastor in Minneapolis. That church is part of the same network. So
Oh, I
if you're
didn't know that. I
if you're
didn't know that.
connecting, yeah. So if you're connecting the dots here, Joe Rigney, who's a guy who's also written, not only kind of these pro-Christian nationalist views, but actually a whole book on how empathy is a sin,
Yes.
right? Is part of this worldview. So it absolutely is a network, and there is connections there. And you don't have to look too far too. That I mean, Hegseth has this not only in his heart, but on his body. Right, in these tattoos, he has like Christian nationalist tattoos on his body that say "Deus vult," God wills it, which is what the kind of Christian crusaders were saying as they killed Muslims, right back during the Crusades, with a sword tattooed on his arm. So like that's on the body of our head of the Department of Defense
Have you seen his
today.
new one? So it's God wills it, Deus
Yeah.
Vult, and then he has Kafir. Kafir in Arabic. And you know what Kafir is? Kafir
Oh,
is, yeah, Kafir is a new one because I saw it when he was cosplaying and he likes to work out with like, I don't know, like a green beret and they just laugh at him because he can't do a pull up. But he has Kafir written there. And Kafir, for those who don't know, in Arabic means one who rejects faith. But so at the same time, he's branded himself as a Kafir in the sense that, oh, I'm a kafir according to Islam, but at the same time, Deus Vult, Iron Cross. So he's kind of
yeah,
embracing the Crusader mindset. And this is the same man who, when he was drunk 10 years ago, said, kill all Muslims.
yeah.
Sorry, continue.
No. I think it's important to say, like, I mean, all of this sounds kind of fantastical, right? And if we'd had this conversation 5 years ago, it would have just sounded surreal. But this is the reality. I think we can't say that enough. That this is the surreal reality that we are dealing with, and this is who has their hands on troop movements, right? And the other thing that you mentioned here is the Nazi stuff, and I want to just hammer this too. That it's not just Trump on the campaign trail was ending all of his his speeches with "one people, one family, one glorious nation under God." This triptych thing,
Yes.
right? That is very very close to "Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer," right? Which was
The Nazi
Hitler's
slogan.
Thing, and the Department of Labor just this month was posting on their Twitter feed "One homeland, one people, one history," right? A very similar slogan and kind of deliberately echoing these things. So, I mean, this infiltration, I think, and the way it's been wrapped up, this whenever we hear the word heritage, from this, it is a Christian nationalist code again, right? That heritage, it's race and it's religion, and it's all wrapped up all wrapped up together.
Yeah, and folks, we've said this before many times. It's the Department of Labor and DHS. Those two accounts in particular are straight up run by Nazi groypers. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no dog whistles. They're using Nazi font. They're using white supremacist language. They're using those white Norman Rockwell-esque
Yeah.
Manifest Destiny posters.
Yeah.
The White House.
Over the objections of his estate, by the way. I just want to say that the Rockwell the Rockwell Foundation has been pushing back on this. Yeah, but
It's like, stop using this. The
yeah,
day before MLK, you saw the Department of Labor with that all-white Christian Sunday
yeah,
portrait, right? So this is the end game, and the end game is there, and it's done with a giant cross. And so many people see, Robbie, this is what happens. I'm sure you get asked this all the time. I don't understand. They read the Bible, Jesus, and then there's Trump. How, Robbie?
mm,
How? How can they reconcile this? He's like the
yeah.
Pharaoh. He's not Jesus. He's the Pharaoh. He's worse than the Pharaoh.
Well, I mean, you've seen the gymnastics that they have gone through and the kind of crazy iterations to try to justify. This first of all, it was like this wild argument. Oh, well, he's a baby Christian. He just hasn't grown in the faith yet. He'll come out of these
Oh yeah,
awful
baby
things.
Christian. That was the
Yeah,
first term.
right,
Baby
right.
Christian.
So that didn't work, obviously. And then there was like, oh no, he's maybe the unrighteous king that's going to be God's instrument. Another. So they just kind of got all kinds of gymnastics to justify it. But I think what it really comes down to is
They
this.
called him Cyrus, the pagan
Yeah,
king, who
Cyrus. Yeah,
God nonetheless used as his instrument for good.
right. But this is all just grasping at straws, right, to justify the unjustifiable at the end of the day. And what it comes down to is this shotgun marriage between white evangelicals and Trump is really all just about quid pro quo, right? That totally
Mm,
works for Trump, and it really has worked for white evangelicals as well. I mean, when you listen to Trump, when he talked to evangelical audience, he was always saying to them, "You put me into power." He even said, "You only have to vote again, right? I'll
right.
take care of it."
That's right.
For you. And we'll bring back power to the Christian churches. We'll bring back the churchgoer. Like he only says that to white Christian audiences. Like you can you imagine him saying in front of a black church saying, "We're going to bring back your members into power. We're going to," or at a mosque saying, "We're going to bring back the mosque goer." Like I mean, it's just unimaginable. So if you kind of remember that, it really is about restoring power, and they've bought it. Right. And one of the reasons why they bought it is that they know their numbers aren't what they were. And I do think the kind of 4 in 10 Americans, white Christians, white evangelicals, by the way, just make sure I say this, have dropped from being nearly a quarter of the country 25 years ago to being 13% of the country today.
Wow. Wow.
Right. So,
And
so yeah.
go ahead, continue.
No, I just think so. I mean, they've lost half their members as a proportion of the population over the last 25 years. That's part of what's going on here. If we can't hold on to it by democratic means, we are going to hold on to it with pure assertions of power. And Donald Trump is our means to asserting that power.
And Dan Bongino said it. Remember, like that viral clip? Power.
Yeah.
Power. He literally said sheer power. Charlie Kirk said it. Steve Bannon said, F the Overton window, just do it. And this is where, I mean, I know people might find this odd. I give credit to Republicans for one thing. When they get power, Robbie, they just do whatever they want. They're like, this is what my base wants. I'm going to do it. Stop me. And then everyone else,
Yeah.
Democrats, are like, let me go punch myself in the face and then go bear hug Liz Cheney. And when we get power, we give it voluntarily to the centrists who then go vote for ICE. But this is how it's always been, because we have always bent the knee to this right-wing, violent white minority. We've always said, now, Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis, instead of accountability, let's give them a slap on the wrist and let's make monuments for them, right? Now, let's not call them racist. That's mean. Now, let's not actually, talk about white supremacy. That's mean. Let's throw the woke under the bus. This country has always coddled white supremacy, always coddled this death force that Robbie is openly telling us to our face, give us power, we'll kill you. And we're like, so that means if we give you power, you'll be nice to us? No, we'll kill you.
Mm.
All right, here's power. Charlie Kirk, you're doing politics the right way. I mean, Robbie,
Mm.
let's just be blunt. Clearly, you cannot coddle fascism. You cannot debate white Christian nationalism. You cannot both sides white Christian nationalism. Am I
Yeah.
out of pocket in saying that this is an authoritarian movement that is seeking power by any violent means necessary?
Yeah, I don't think that's an overstatement. I actually end the new book with a chapter called "Embracing Division,"
Mm,
and what I mean there is that far too many, particularly white Christians of goodwill, have been unwilling to draw the line and say, "Oh, no, no, this far and no farther," right? Beyond this, we can't coddle you, we can't scold you, we have to resist you, right? If you cross this line, and I think that's where we are. And we are. I just what I keep coming back to. There was funding in that big beautiful bill last year, right, to fund 50,000 beds in concentration camps on U.S. soil.
that's right. $170 billion to ICE and detention centers and private prisons.
Yeah,
Correct.
and we just had it this week that a Cuban migrant was asphyxiated in one of those concentration camps in Montana. That
No,
happened this week.
that was yesterday. The autopsy came out. He
Yeah, the
was murdered.
autopsy came out. Yeah, they said he tried to kill himself, but the autopsy came out and said, no, no, this is not consistent with that. And there's an eyewitness that said he was handcuffed, constrained by four guards while under in custody, like disarmed, like defenseless, and is asphyxiated there. So no, I think that we're going to have to find some. I've been sort of saying like we're all going to have to find some bright lines. And there are plenty of them every day now, right? And just say like, yeah, no more. Like we can't pretend this isn't politics as normal. This is not Republican versus Democrat. This is democracy versus fascism, and that's where we're at.
That's where we're at. And I've been saying it, and I'll say it again. You cannot debate fascists. You have to dismantle them. You cannot coddle fascists. You have to crush them legally and peacefully. And I think this is where we're at. And a lot of people are now asking, well, okay, what can history teach us then, Robbie, about what we all of us, religious leaders, atheists, organizers, students, how do we dismantle this pervasive force? And I think this is a key thing that we always try to say on Left Hook and Democracy Ish. This is nothing new, folks. Everyone else will come, corporate media will come and say, wow, this just happened yesterday. And we're like, this is a long arc,
Yeah.
right? This is the original sin in America. This has been here since the beginning. And until we confront it and uproot this dark heart and rip it out of our body, it's going to repeat again and again and again and again. And so I'm not interested anymore, Robbie, in restoration. I need transformation. And maybe this is it. Maybe this is a transformational moment where so many privileged Americans, we're all privileged, right? It can happen here. It can happen here. Now we're seeing masked armed ICE agents terrorizing our communities. They're like, oh shit, if we don't embrace a type of New Deal transformation, FDR type moment, it's over. Like they're going to
Yeah.
come back. They're not going to stop, Robbie. And that's what I want to warn people. They're not going to stop. They wake up every day and they dream of this, and they have billions of dollars. They have Betsy DeVos and her billions of dollars. They have her psychopathic brother, the head of Blackwater. I'm forgetting his name, and I rarely forget names. They have, these right wing tycoons. They have Elon Musk, a trillionaire. These people live and breathe and tweet this stuff on 24/7. But we have the numbers. We have the numbers, Robbie. What can we do with the numbers? Eric Prince, thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I'm going to be along with you too. I think we got 6 months to
Tell him
figure this
why
out.
6 months. I've been saying 6 months also. Tell him why 6 months.
Well, yeah, we didn't coordinate this, but yeah, because I think what we have is between now and the midterm elections, right? And because we've got to start thinking ahead, because what we're seeing in Minnesota, I firmly believe, is just a dress rehearsal for what's going to be uh, kind of unspun in strategic districts ahead of the midterm elections, right? To kind of thwart just the right number of elections to kind of prevent the House from flipping from Republican to Democrat. These are not ends in themselves, right? They are dress rehearsals for bigger things to come. So I think the importance of the resistance happening in Minnesota is important. I think the importance of all of us standing in solidarity with that. And when it comes to our communities, and it will come to many of our communities, I think that's the other thing to say. This is what always happens, right? that kind of Martin Niemöller poem. First they came for the trade unionists. I didn't say anything because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I wasn't didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me. There's nobody else left for me. I think is dead on the mark. And by the way, that's saying for somebody for who himself sat on the sidelines too
That's
long.
key.
Right? It's
That's
a
key.
lament from him after the fact. But I think we've got a moment now to say, like, we've got to kind of, so I would say, like, common things like sign up to be a poll worker in your local community. That's going to be a way to kind of do something courageous in this election cycle. It's not going to be a walk in the park. Sign up to kind of protect those elections, whatever you can do at the local level, because they're still run at the local level. But kind of signing up to help protect those things for volunteering activities, protests, I think, to keep the pressure on. But then I think in our day to day lives, we're all going to find ourselves in our jobs, in our communities, asked to compromise, asked to sort of like not make things uncomfortable, not to confront something that's going to create an awkward social situation. We're all going to have to be willing to do that over and over and over again to not normalize this fascist creep that we're seeing in the country.
And I think it's a full scale assault resistance. Every single lever must be pulled 10 toes down. At 2 p.m., in about 4 minutes, there's going to be a mass walkout in Minnesota. They're shutting everything down. Resistance, peaceful resistance. You see in Minnesota organically, white people are being radicalized. I don't know if you've seen these videos, man. It's remarkable. Like middle aged white dudes are like, they're coming after my neighbors. I'm done. Right? They're like,
Yeah,
it's over. You're seeing judges now get a little bit of spine. Each small little victory. I always tell people this, Robbie, and you're a historian. Fascism isn't defeated with this haymaker. It's death by 1,000 cuts.
yeah,
Because we have the numbers, and you slowly but surely need the majority to rise up. Right? There's also social shaming. Talk to us
yeah,
about the shaming aspect of it, because at the end of the day, we're human beings. And Ken Klippenstein, I think it was 2 weeks ago, he had a whistleblower. He had someone in ICE saying that they're kind of internally overwhelmed by the hate that they've experienced, because these fascists, these Nazis, think that everyone's a Nazi. And so when they sit there and like, giggity, giggity, ha, 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 let me do this Department of Labor tweet. Isn't everyone going to love this? Hee, hee, hee. Let me go unleash ICE. Isn't everyone a psychopath like me? And now he's negative 27. ICE is negative 27, according to yesterday's
yeah.
NYT polls. So something about talk to us about the public shaming of it all.
Well, I think that's why it's important. I think, particularly for clergy, for people to show up like as a church, like against all of this. I think that's really important because there's a moral question here. And I think what you said is, there is a way in which reality gets defined, by what we're socially creating. So when we can move what's normative and acceptable, right, by protesting, that can sort of send the signal like, no, 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 this is over the line. No, we're not actually going to stand for this. We're not really for this. And again, there are more of us than them. But I think that pressure can, in fact, even affect people who are, like having guys like quit their job, right? That kind of thing, right? And that pressure, I think, is really, really important. The pressure on the churches that are defending this, I think, is also important too. That's certainly what the civil rights workers were doing
And
down in Mississippi.
And speaking about, it was mostly black protesters. They had civil disobedience. They weren't violent. They interrupted allegedly
Yeah,
this church service. Talk to us about the history of that, the tradition of that happening in the South.
yeah. Well, I mentioned the Medgar Evers thing, and it's important to say, like, yeah, they were nonviolent. That's really important. It's possible they were breaking private property laws by entering the service. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that might be possible. But then the question you have to ask yourself is, when is it appropriate to break a law like that? You're not going into violence, but and to take the consequences to raise
Boston
a
Tea
more
Party.
to make a moral point. Yeah. And I think we're gonna have to think about those kinds of protests always staying nonviolent. Of course, that's really important. But and I think that's actually important. It's important morally. It's also important because if you're trying to move the needle to saying what kind of a country do we want to be, right? That's the way to demonstrate it. We live it out. We demonstrate it, and part of that is protecting, our undocumented neighbors. Part of that is shaming people who are complicit in the machine. And I think the other part of it is just like, yeah, just being the conscience of the community, right? And saying like, this is how we express where we think our community should be. And if everybody stays quiet, I mean, that's the thing. King also said, Martin Luther King's birthday week this week. And that sign about him, it just takes people. It takes good people sitting on the sidelines. That's what it takes for
Right.
evil to
That's right.
triumph.
So people always tell me this, Robbie, and I know you got to go, but what can I? Literally, people tell me I'm nobody. What can I do? I'm like, we're all nobodies, but we're all
Yeah,
somebody to someone, and we all have a voice. And at the very least, if you speak up in your family, in your home,
yeah,
at your picnics, at your church, at your mosque, if you look at the end of the day, folks, where do we spend most of our time? In our streets, So in your local communities, if you create your local community as a sanctuary, as a fortress, right? At least this hate doesn't spread there. And congratulations, now you have inoculated your street, your family, your neighborhood, your school, right? It's like a virus that is causing mass psychosis. That's what happens with fascism. And you're like, nope, not here. Not here. This is where we protect ourselves. So the way you model
yeah.
yourself, what you teach your kids, how you reach out to your neighbors, if you create like this buffer zone, local by local by local, it spreads, it spreads, it spreads, and then more and more inoculation and the psychosis, hopefully the virus dies out, right? That's the only way. And I know people
Mhm.
want a haymaker. A haymaker is not going to happen. But there's more of us than there are of them, which is why we
Mhm.
need full scale resistance. And right now it's 2 p.m. In Minnesota. That's what they're doing, folks. It's a mass walkout. And bringing back full circle, hundreds of faith leaders, clergy, churches, mosques, synagogues are joining this mass movement of a walkout right now on a Friday, walking out of schools, walking out of jobs, and people are protesting ICE occupying and terrorizing their city. Someone's asking, what's a haymaker? A haymaker is when a boxer puts all of their weight and power behind this one punch. Now, when they do it, they kind of expose themselves, but they're like, I'm going to knock out the opponent with this one magical punch. But most boxers, if you've seen, and using the boxing analogy, you got to go the Floyd Merriweather route. You got to be consistent. You have to have stamina. Jab, 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 body, body, jab, jab, body, jab, jab, defense, 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 jab, jab, jab. It's not that sexy. It's not that exciting, Robbie. But in the long term, it slowly but surely dismantles the opponent. And the opponent then, by the seventh round, all of a sudden falls. And I think that's what's important with fascism. It's death by 1,000 cuts, and each one of us has a little job to do. One small cut here and there. They don't have the numbers. They're not popular. Trump is underwater on every issue, according to
Yeah.
all the polls. ICE is now negative 27 in 1 week, folks, with the murder of Renee Good. They did something that I've been trying to do since 2003. Tell everyone that ICE and DHS is terrible. They did it themselves. So all we got to do is organize. Robbie, thank you so much for your time. You are a national treasure, sir, and PRRI does fantastic research. Robbie, shamelessly, please promote yourself.
All right. Well, yeah, we got a bunch of data on Christian nationalism at prri.org. You can
PRRI.org. I just shared it.
Thank you. You can follow me on Substack, where I'm writing every week. I just wrote a piece on how Trump's lies are killing us about ICE at whitetolong.net. That's my Substack.
Whitetolong.net. Got it.
Yeah, my Substack, and then I have a book out coming up. It's available for pre-order. Won't be out till early fall, but it is called Backslide: Reclaiming a Faith and a Nation After the Christian Turn Against Democracy. And if you're into the history that we've been talking about all the way back to Columbus, my last book, The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy and a Path to a Shared American Future, delves all into that deep history of
Didn't that
how
win
we
an
got here.
American Book Award?
Oh, it might have. Yeah, thank you for that. Uh,
That folks, for folks who don't know, I have several hats, and allow me real quick to. I barely talk about this, even though I should
yeah.
talk about it more. The American Book Awards have been given out for nearly 4 decades, and they're given out by the Before Columbus Foundation, and it's a what we call a writers award, right? Like writers and poets really want that award because that award is given out by our august body, and people don't know I'm the president of the Before Columbus
Mhm.
Foundation. That doesn't mean anything. It's just a nice title. But our board members who unanimously give out the annual awards include people like Ishmael Reed, Henry Louis Gates Jr., Joy Harjo, Juan Felipe Herrera. We have Maxine Hong Kingston, Marlon James, Leila Lalami, Viet Thanh Nguyen. These are just some of the board members that we have. And every year we give out the American Book Awards. And Robbie's book won the American Book Award when it came out, and it was in a unanimous decision. So Robbie's one of those nerds who was like, "Wow, I won an American Book Award," and
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
I'm glad you appreciate it. Okay, wait. I'm now putting the link to your book, backslide reclaiming. Can you give the title one more time? I just put
Yeah.
the title.
Reclaiming a faith and a nation after the Christian turn against democracy. Yep.
And also, folks, if I may, oh, when my mom said this to me, wait, hold on. My mom was really pissed off. Can you imagine? That's why you have good moms. My mom's like, "Where's your book?" That was my mom yesterday. She
There
goes,
you
"How
go.
come your book is not being seen?" So there you go. That's why you got to have immigrant parents. And allow me to be shameless. Also, this is the Left Hook. There's no paywalls. Everything is free, folks. If you can, please become a subscriber. If you have a few dollars, I have a Terrible Capitalist New Year special. It's $3.75. It's for the month of January. I'm putting it right now. It's a lefthook.substack.com/special. And folks, it's $3.75 forever per month, $37 a year. If you have no money, that's okay. Become a free subscriber. At least, if this information was helpful, and a lot of people, Robbie, are saying it was. Thank you so much for coming on. They thought this was very eye-opening. 2,000 people who were watching. Share
That's
this with
amazing.
people. Yeah, send this link, share this with people because people don't know, right? What's common to us isn't common to everyone else. And I think now there's an eyes wide open moment, right? George Floyd was killed a mile away from Renee Nicole Good. Uh, Maybe there's a reason this is happening. I don't know, why, but maybe, there's flashpoints in history where people are forced to confront the sins that are in front of their face. And I hope something good can happen. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but something good can happen from the murder of Renee Nicole Good is that her death is not in vain and it activates people to rise up. Robbie, thanks so much for your time. You're in DC here with me. We're apparently going to have 10 to 15 inches of snow. Who knows? This town, for those who don't know, Virginia, DC, ain't like Minnesota or New York. We freak out if there's 1 inch of snow. So it's going to be like Armageddon here, even though it's not. But everyone stay safe, stay warm, Robbie, and everyone else. I'll be back in 1 hour with another fantastic conversation with Mike Nellis. Folks, be kind, be informed, be decent, organize, and please, oh, please don't be a fascist. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching.